chance to connect with each other. We've got a bunch of people who have registered for this session, and we're super excited to dive into a lot of different things that we can do right now, even when we're working from home, to continue to nurture and build a dream network. And that is something that could not be more prescient and relevant right now with everything that's going on in the economy. So I'm going to let people continue to filter in here a little bit. And I see some chats starting to come in. So that is really cool. I'm going to pull that off to the side of my screen for a minute. And I want to introduce our guest here in just a second. But first, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I'm Matt Hunkler. I'm the founder of Powder Keg and your host today. Super excited about the topic that we're talking about right now. And that is all about how to network and continue to grow and nurture our network, even when we are remote, even when we're working from home. So we do have a poll going here. If you're tuning in on Zoom, you can answer that poll. I highly encourage you to do that because that will help direct some of our conversation in the second half of the show, which is all Q&A. Also just want to mention, again, you can introduce yourself. Again, if you're here on Zoom, you can introduce yourself on the chat. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, go ahead and just drop a comment below, say hi, maybe share why you're here today or what you're currently working on, and maybe what you're currently struggling with. I know we all have struggles right now, myself included, and you might even see some of that on today's show. I am hosting this from my home. This is not a studio. I literally have like makeshift lights paired up here. You see my graphics department, who is me, like 10 minutes ago with our fancy graphics here. So if I happen to cut out for a minute or something goes down, just bear with us. It usually takes us 30 seconds to figure something out if it goes wrong. But today, I really want to make sure that this is not just a webinar. This is truly a virtual event, two-way communication. We want to get your questions answered. So if you have a question, type it in the Q&A box below if you're watching on Zoom. And that's a super easy, just Q&A. It looks like 2 chat bubbles. Click there and then use the raise your hand function. We'll literally bring you on the show so you can ask your question live. Now, if you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, you can do that by simply typing a question into the comments below. So if you have a question, please, please, please ask it here. Kelly is a wealth of information. We're going to be talking about the current situation with regards to network. And I know our guest today has been talking with her community on her own podcast and with her own social following, with her own just tremendous network. And we'll talk a little bit about that, of just how we can be continuing to nurture and move our business relationships forward when we're in this crazy pandemic time that we're in right now. So without further ado, please let me introduce our guest today. Our guest is someone that I actually met in Aruba, of all places, because she is just magical like that and appears in the most amazing places. And in fact, I think the last time I saw her in person was on the stage of the famous Ryman Theater where the Grand Ole Opry used to be hosted. J. Kelly Hoey, as she is known in full title, she goes by just Kelly. She's J.K. Hoey on Twitter, so make sure you find her there. But she has been lauded as one of Forbes' 1 of 5 women changing the world of VC and entrepreneurship, one of the 25 smartest women on Twitter, according to Fast Company, one of the 100 most influential women in tech on Twitter by Business Insider, Inc., top 10s, the list goes on and on. I literally had all of these listed out, but I want to make sure we get to talking to Kelly. So Kelly, without further ado, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's awesome to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's so exciting. And I was just reflecting on kind of our relationship and the fact that the times that I've run into you in person have been some of the most amazing places that I have ever been. I think says a lot about your ability to network, and you're just always doing awesome things. I love following you on social media because you're always connecting with great people. You're always looking to help. And I think we'll probably get to some of those personal, I don't know what you'd call them, core values of yours in this conversation. But I just wanted to maybe open by talking a little bit about how did you get to where you are today? And I know that's a big question, but can you remember your first memory of building a business relationship?
I mean, some of the approach I take to network building, and thank you for having me and having this discussion. The approach I take to
Absolutely.
networking and network building goes back to when sorry everyone, when I was a lawyer, and I'm a graduate of law school, University of British Columbia School of Law, practiced in Toronto, and that was back in the day where we did not have social media. There were attorney advertising rules, and you needed to grow and nurture your network from the relationships you had. And you needed to do that by paying attention to their needs. And you needed to do that by thinking about what it was that they needed, and delivering, whether it was a piece of work, delivering a great product, doing a great job, and then having other people talk about you. And so that sort of sits at that core for me. And I've always sort of thought about, Matt, like how you build from that core of the relationships you have, because every opportunity, when I look back at my own career, has sort of unfolded that way versus me applying on a help wanted or, some magical stranger, delivering something that I thought I needed. It's all come from someone in my network knowing. So when I think back, that's where all of that starts for me.
Well, and I know you did a lot of the right things from the start in terms of nurturing your relationship. But do you remember some of the maybe stumbles you had early on when you were trying to figure out the right way to connect and build relationships?
Oh, I want to tell you, Adam, one massive stumble I had was, so I moved to New York from Toronto back in 1998. And when I decided to make a career change 4 years later, yeah, 2002, I realized I'd made a massive, massive error. I had a very robust network in a very narrow area of business. And it did not give me strength and movement to make a career change, the career change I wanted. And I had to rebuild, like I had to build an entirely new network. And that was a massive mistake. So for people listening right now, they might be thinking, oh, put in your favorite profanity. Oh, but this is where you need to start thinking, all right, it's not just your business relationships that can help you right now. Who are your current colleagues? Who are your colleagues from a prior job? Who are the people you see on the weekend, used to see on the weekend? Who'd you go to church with? Who'd you volunteer with? Who do you go to school with? All of those networks can come to bear and help you if you have been there for them. But that was a massive mistake of mine. And so once I realized that, I thought to myself, I'm never putting my career in that kind of jeopardy ever again.
I love that. I love that lesson. I can definitely relate to that. I think everyone probably can to some degree with respect to college and what they could have been doing in college versus what might have been helpful after college. I think that's the one that resonates for me the most. But I know that one of the things that people struggle with, or at least I have struggled with, is as your network kind of continues to grow, um, it can start to feel a little bit overwhelming,
Mhm.
and almost like this. You saw the headlines last year about people being overwhelmed by social media and that it's causing people to become depressed or be stressed out
Mhm.
because there's so many different interactions, so many different relationships. Do you have any advice for how to uh, maybe have the right mindset when approaching networking when it comes to everything online?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd say manage your time on it because we don't need to be there all the time. And think about where you need to be, like when I say that, which device you need to have it on. So other Instagram and Twitter sits on my phone. That's the only two. And I turn off all notifications because there can be a complete distraction factor on it that can then raise your anxiety levels and then spiral into, oh my God, I need to do whatever. The second thing I would say is think about those platforms as real, like real places where you meet people as opposed to that social thing, that internet thing, right? Because I think how we behave online it should be as seamless when we meet someone in person and vice versa. So as I say in my book, I think of, LinkedIn as the office. I think of, sort of Facebook as friends and family, or used to think of it that way. Twitter is the cocktail party, right? So how we are, who we are is the same, but how you communicate in each of those situations is very different. So LinkedIn, that's a Monday through Friday thing for me. And I typically just post the things that I think are going to be helpful for my network. So I may not talk to everybody every day, but anyone who's following me will know that at least first thing in the morning, I'll try and post something that I think will help them in their career. And then, say Instagram kind of gets a mixed bag with me of kind of work and personal. And then Twitter, it's like, well, who can I have coffee with in the morning for 30 minutes? And when at the end of the day, maybe I want to have a little dialogue and, chat about some other things. And where am I the good guest at the cocktail party when I think of Twitter, that someone wants to come back or wants me to come back to their party? And that's the way I think of them. But part of the managing it is like managing the distraction and managing the time. And if you have all of those social networking apps on your phone with notifications, it's going to drive you crazy.
I 100% agree with that. And I actually love that mindset. I'm going to start turning on like coffee shop playlists when I'm like engaging on social in the morning, just to kind of put myself in that mindset. I love that, Kelly, because I think both you and I are kind of people, which is why we end up reconnecting with each other at events again and again and again. And in this world we're in now, where obviously we want to be as socially distant, at least physically, as possible to help flatten the curve. That little mental hack is something I will absolutely apply. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. But it's also because I think it'll help, because there's times when, like, I'm feeling right now, particularly because I have a particular affinity and love for Twitter. And for me right now, Twitter in many ways feels like the Twitter I joined back in kind of 2008, 2009. People are just having little conversations, and the kinds of conversations that people who use Twitter in a one-way marketing way wouldn't understand, because you just see this sort of ping pong ball of 2 or 3 sentences back and forth, right? Like short little back, and you're like, what are they doing? Well, we're just having a chat. And you need to think about the fact that these are real people. They're not just avatars. And you got to wonder, when you join a conversation, would I do this in real life? Like if you and I were sitting in a Starbucks having a conversation, Matt, someone coming up and, thrusting their service in our face. Oh, you guys should check this out. I mean, you wouldn't do that in person. That would be rude. That would be totally obnoxious. We'd probably tell you to talk to the hand if we were being nice, or if I was being my New Yorker self, I'd say something worse. No, so don't do that on Twitter. You know what? If you want to come and talk to me on Twitter, come and talk to me. Come and be part of my network. See what I'm doing. Don't just show up because, oh, Kelly just mentioned X. Oh, good. I'm going to come and try and sell her that. Yeah, no, I lose my mind on it. Or I just block you, one of the two.
It's like the person at the physical networking events that goes around just like shoving business cards in people's hands, thinking that's networking. You don't want to be that person.
No. And because, the more you think of, all right, this is a real person. What can I learn from them? Because they've detailed everything on their LinkedIn profile. They've got a podcast, they've got a this. Let me pull all these little disparate bits of piece of information together. And now let me see if I can get an introduction, or now let me see if, what I want to talk to them about. And the more you do that, and the more you're like, okay, let me talk as a human being, not as a one-way business development or marketing flow, the greater the likelihood that when we don't have to be socially distant, you're actually going to be like, oh, it's like the same person. I mean, the only time someone sort of thought I was different than I was online was they said, you're much taller than your Twitter profile. Anyway.
Yeah, you're only like this big on the internet. You mentioned your book, Kelly, which I'm so glad that you published it, and I pre-ordered it when it came out. and I was digging for it this morning because we moved to the new house and we still don't have all our bookshelves up. So I was digging for that copy of it so I could bring out specific pieces of it. But I was wondering if you could share
Oh,
maybe why you wrote that book.
Does your book look like mine? Yeah.
Boom. Now I don't have the like post-it notes, but I have a highlighter system. So I am highlighters and ballpoint pens and dog ears. Those are my
All
three
right. Well, you know what?
go-tos.
When you find that book, you're going to come on and talk to me about that, because this week I'm doing the first. I'm so excited about this. I'm interviewing a reader of my book about how he uses my book, because he made a reference to
Love it.
the diagram on like page 60, and he's like, "This is what I do every time I get a new project," and I'm like, "We need to talk. I need to understand this." So I'm like launching a new thing that I'm like interviewing readers of my book to find out how they're applying it. So why did I write the book? This is a really great question for this reason. Right now, lots of people are thinking about what they're going to be doing. They may be in career transition, voluntary or involuntary. They may have thought about re-entering the workforce. They may be in a job that they think, I'm not happy about it. When things change, I want to do something else. This is a really good time to listen to your network, because they often see more in you than you see in yourself, in terms of your skill set, in terms of the type of work that kind of rocks your world and all the rest of it. And the reason I wrote this book was my network basically told me to. And I had been approached by several people for networking advice for their books. And I was sort of like, hold on a minute here. Maybe I should do this. And when I kind of hinted at that with a few people in my network, there was this like massive sigh of relief. They were like, oh my God, thank you. You're finally doing what we've wanted you to do for years. So, listen to your network. And I really wanted to write a book that had case studies and roadmaps, not just, I had dinner on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, right? Like, I wanted to show people like, here, you can do this. And as an aside, like one comment or book reviewer, they said my book wasn't very helpful because all I did was highlight people who had successful networks. I'm like, you didn't read my book. None of the people in my book were born with a big old network. All of them built it a relationship at a time and achieved really amazing career results, from working their way up from a customer service role to a coveted, managerial position, building books of business, changing careers, keeping a career in an economic downturn, all sorts of things like that. And so anyway, that's why I wrote it. Writing a book was not on my bucket list, but neither was having dinner on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. And both of those things have been pretty damn great.
Those are pretty damn cool. I 100% agree. I heard you mention how to keep your job in an economic downturn. Any advice for that? Maybe people that are listening right now?
I mean, this is where you look around and you say, where can I add value? Where can I be a great colleague? Where can I help out? Where can I be, I often say to people, don't network, be of service. Where are there things within my company, my industry, and it may be sort of broader within your company. So actually the case study was our mutual friend, Verilee Crows, who we know from Aruba. And she was at a Big Four accounting firm, and she was hired in the New York office. She'd moved from the Aruba office. She'd hired right before, it was like close to in proximity of the financial crisis, and sort of the last hire in. You think you're going to be the first one fired. At the end of the day, had been 32 people in the department. Val, one of them, and she was the last hire. At the end of the financial crisis, there was 4 left in that department, and she was one of the 4. Wow. And what she had done was, yes, she was good at what she does, but that's what we all should be. In the job we're in, we should be really good at it. So she was good at that. She looked around and she figured, right, if I am going to keep my job, more than my boss needs to know that I'm good at my job. Where else can I, lend a hand? Where else can I contribute to the well-being of the firm. And so she wrote speeches for people. She got involved in firm events. She, like the volunteer, like all over the place, so that other people were talking about her. And that was really, really key. So, if you're thinking about it right now, like, if you haven't spent that time on your internal network or haven't thought that networking at work is important, I would say, do your 180 on that right now. And how can you be of service? How can you see other opportunities? Where, when someone is asking for, like, what can we do differently? Voice your opinion, share those ideas. And that should help you, hold you out and help you out in good stead.
That's great advice. I'm seeing a few questions come in here from our live viewers, and I'd love to pull one in right now. This is actually an anonymous question. This question says, you both mentioned key events that are very valuable. What types of events are those? And is it a national group like Entrepreneurs Organization, or is it something else?
Well, I mean, this is my advice right now, because, obviously we're not in real life, but we are in real life. And this is where taking advantage of the chat function and using them to your advantage. So let me do that, and then I'll go back to how you find sort of some of these groups. But use these chat functions to the fullest to network. I recently did a presentation for the global networking group for the creative community, Creative Mornings. And when people were joining their Zoom call, I said to everybody, please say who you are, who you work for, like where you are in the world, right? Are you in New York? Are you in Brooklyn? Are you in Vancouver? Like, where are you? And say who you work for, and then ask your question. Okay. So if you jump in and say, hey, everybody, great to meet you. I'm Matt. This is blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden you start networking with people. And what happened in that Creative Mornings presentation, somebody asked a question. They said, I've just recently moved to San Diego, and I'm wondering how to meet some new people. The number of people who then piled on and who were like, hey, I'm in San Diego, I can help you out, all that kind of thing. So treat the chat function not as this sort of, I don't know, like the customer service on, the chat bots we get. Don't use it that way. Use it as the equivalent, as if you were sitting next to people in a room and you were extending your hand to say, hey, here's who I am, and who are you, and this is where I am, and this is, like, use it in that human way. But like, look around, there's all sorts of conferences, not just you guys, who have now taken in real life events virtual. Go and look for those organizations, how they're taking them online, how they're offering up things. I think the more people do things like this, and so, pat yourself on the back, kudos to you, Matt, and your community, the more that you're doing these things and showing that it's your community first oriented, those, when we're allowed back, out of our cages, out of our self-isolation, out of our voluntary quarantine, when we're allowed to gather again, those are the communities you want to be part of, because they've cared about their community first. And that's where you should be headed, always. But I think right now, given the roadblocks and barriers with virtual, go for the communities that are community first.
That's great advice. Our next question is from Fraser in the UK. Give Fraser a minute to come on so he can ask his question, although I know he is quite a distance away. So Fraser, can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can.
We can hear you. Welcome to the show, Fraser. What profession are you in, and what do you do?
Yeah, so I've kind of actually got it's kind of 3 strands to the business. So the first one's kind of technology. I'm looking to do like training courses into corporates as one. The second is books, and the third is art. So really what I'm kind of come on today is trying to crack the US, hard market, big country. And I think particularly because I'm an artist, so I've finished a children's book, which toys, but I'm trying to really take that to the States. So it's my books and also my art as well. So we have actually, just to kind of give you an update on the art. So the BBC here has done, I don't know if they've done it in the US, a thing called Isolation in Art. So the kiddies are all, or children, I should say, not kiddies. The children are all doing rainbows, and I've kind of jumped on that with a motivational word, but I'm looking to sell these type of paints into corporates like boardrooms, hotels, hospitals, airports. So that's an avenue I really want to get into. But the books is quite prevalent at the moment, because my first book's out already, and my second book, I'm just trying to get that published and out. But I do really want to hit radio and TV. So it's trying to get some bites, if that makes sense. So I just kind of feel at the moment I need to get one door opening, and then it's door opens, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Fraser, if I could
please.
summarize. Oh, so go. I was just going to say what I heard was, Fraser, you're trying to figure out how to take an already successful career in the UK and break into the US market while you're also launching your second book.
Correct. Yeah. And then also what I've been doing as well with the art, I really want to kind of get that now global as well.
Great. That's really helpful, Fraser. Thank you. Great question.
Excellent summary there, Matt. Thank you. And Fraser, thank you for the question. The first thing I would say, as someone who has moved to the US, I'm saying Matt will back me up on this. There is no US market. There is very many markets. And so you've really got to narrow down like who and where. In this case, sort of like, I know it's with respect to the children's, the book, and I'm hearing with respect to children, but narrow down and sort of focus in on like a slender piece of all of that, because this is the biggest consumer market in the world, but it's not made up of one market. We are very different in New York than we are in the center of the country, than we are on the West Coast. So I would just sort of say that is, and that's a good mindset to take in on this. This is also right now where I would say, if you've already had success in the UK, where are the relationships you already have who can start to help you make inroads in this market? And that can take a little bit of work, but that is work and time well spent, because just throwing, Hail Marys into the US market, it's kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something's going to stick. You're better off to start, and I say this for everybody and sort of couching my answer in that way, start with who you already know and start figuring out, like if you've already identified particular publications you want or particular media outlets you want to be in, then start to sort of work your way from that, like who in your network may be connected to that type of industry, that type of person who could give you the entree into those in the US market. So hopefully that makes sense, but that's what I would recommend. I'm also going to add this proviso on all of my answers to everybody. When you write a book on networking, folks, you have to eat your own dog food. And I mean by that is I follow my own advice. So I am not telling you any advice that I wouldn't do myself. And one more thing for Fraser is this is where social media is really handy, not to make in your face kind of, hey, I've got a book I want to sell into the US. That's kind of like the example I gave earlier with Matt about someone charging in. But this is where you can start doing the research. You can watch, you can listen, you can see find the hashtags of who's having conversations around activities for kids, books for kids, that kind of thing. Figure out where those kind of conversations, who's having them, what are they talking about? How can you join their conversation so that they want to turn to you and say, hey, Fraser, tell us about you. What are you working on? There we go. Anyway, next.
No, that's great. That's really good advice. I actually wanted to build on that. Something you said earlier, Kelly, about look for ways to add value. I'm thinking about that, how to apply that to what Fraser does with his books, with his artwork. It seems like both of those have potential. And I don't know enough about your art. I don't know enough about your book, but it seems like there are people in need right now. They might be in need of some artwork. They might be in need of some books. If it's fiction, certainly plenty of time to read fiction right now. If it's nonfiction and you're looking to help someone learn something, now's a great time to be learning something too. So like, are there things that you could do there to give first in a very Techstar sort of way? That's their mantra. Could you give first in the way Kelly is recommending here to give value? That was one thing that came up for me just when you were talking about what you were doing, because you start talking about your artwork. Now I want to see what the artwork is like.
Right.
And now I'm curious about what kind of writing you're doing. So
But
I wonder if there's a way you could potentially.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, sorry to interrupt. I was just like, you know what? How great would it be, Fraser, to make like a Zoom background for people? What better way to show off
Oh,
the art
yeah.
than, you know, like some cool Zoom background that you have when you do these calls, and people are like, whoa, where'd you get that background? I want one. And you're like, here's where you can download it off my website. And then everyone can see everything else you're doing. You know, what
Oh,
piece
I
of your
love that.
what piece of your children's book could you have like a free downloadable thing? Had a conversation on Twitter the other day with my friend Ian Harkin, who has Lottie Dolls, which is in the UK, and the number of hits on his website that happened afterwards because he's got free downloadable, you know, activities for kids that range from STEM to, you know, all sorts of things. Anyway, alphabet, STEM, you know, really important stuff about, you know, careers of really inspiring women, all this kind of stuff. Well, they're on his website downloading this stuff. You don't think they're going to go and look and see what else they can buy while they're there? So.
Totally. That's a great idea. So I wanted to, before we go into our next question here, and it looks like there's still a few questions, so that's great. I did get the results from the poll. The question is, how are you networking remotely currently? And the options were virtual coffees, leveraging current network, social networking, social media, virtual events, and other. And the number one was virtual events, followed by social media, followed by leveraging current network. And so I think that's really interesting. Obviously, we're on a virtual event right now, so maybe that's a little bit skewed data because the people we're polling are the people who attend virtual events. But I'm curious, Kelly, you mentioned jumping into the chat functionality when you're at a virtual event. Do you have any other advice for how to make the most of a virtual event when you're attending one?
Share the information. Use the hashtag. Let your network know that you're attending these events before you attend them. Let your network know afterwards. You know, you never know who you're going to connect with as a result of posting those things. And I say that, you know, like using the hashtag and sharing out the insights, not because I'm sitting here right now and saying, gee, you know, you should be doing that, but it's a way of engaging other people. Let me see, that's happened to me twice in terms of really like great outcomes because of doing that. And one of the times was at South by Southwest. Now, granted, I was live, but because I was tweeting the keynote madly and crazily, you know, every little comment, one of my friends who I had sort of tweeted and followed and had little online conversations with on Twitter direct messaged me and said, whoa, are you here too? And, you know, then I got to spend 90 minutes talking about building community with the first blogger for Dell computers. And Lionel Menchaca has been a really good friend ever since that, but our entire relationship had been on Twitter before then. But because I was tweeting, he's like, whoa, you're here too? Let's go, let's grab a coffee. Let's do this. So, you know what? You want to expand your network with new people? You know, use these functions. We're not just putting out our Twitter handles and hashtags for the fun of it. You know, this can be a way to connect meaningfully if you choose to do that. And then I was interested in those results of the survey, which doesn't really surprise me. People always think of networking, that activity. They always think about it as who is a stranger, a new person who is going to help me, versus how can your existing network be of help and how can you be of help to it? All of us have big, interesting networks behind us. And your existing network, you want them to bring that to bear to what you're doing right now. So how are you nurturing and taking care of them? And so that survey of like, how are you networking now? Come on, people, you got to boost up how you're taking care of your existing network. And your existing network is, yes, the people you work with, the people you used to work with, the people you went to school with, the people you used to go to church with, community service, sat in a co-working space, friends, bowling league, you name it. I don't, all of your hairdresser, your, whatever, right? One of my friends' pivotal introduction came through his personal trainer. Everyone in your network has value and has networks. How are you treating them? Like, come on, let's boost that one up. You'll be much happier in the long run, and you'll have to worry less about schmoozing at in-person events if you do that anyway.
Do you have any suggestions for the right way to reach out during crazy times like these? What does that look like for you? Have you received some outreach that really touched you and really like made you feel like that was someone who cared about you? Any advice on that front?
I'm so glad you're asking this. I think we really need to be careful how we reach out right now, because how we treat people today is going to last longer than this pandemic. And I have said that before, and I'm going to keep saying it. Because if you reach out right now and are a complete and utter insensitive, tone-deaf jerk, we're going to remember that. All of us are going to remember that. Your life, we're messy humans, we're complicated, confused, we're scared, all the rest of us, all of us are feeling that. And you need to realize, even though someone could look perfectly poised and together on a Zoom call right now, that may not be the chaos. They're not showing you the chaos in their life. So you need to realize someone's life is chaotic, and you need to take that into account when you reach out to them. They may be homeschooling, they may be, working full time, their spouse may be out of a job. They may not be posting all of that on Instagram, right? So keep all of that in mind. What I would say even before the time we're in right now, Matt, is I always say to people, if you can find the answer to your question on Google, ask a better question. Do not waste someone's time with something that you could have discovered had you read, the website, had you, read the blog, listened to a single podcast episode. Do the homework so you can ask a better question. I had someone, it was earlier this year, it was probably back in January. They reached out to me because I'd been referred to them to speak at a conference that they were going to be holding. And the person who called me said, I know I can read about you online, but why don't you tell me about yourself? I thought, if this person had not been referred to me by a dear friend, I would have ended the call right then and there. Because wasting someone's time, that's like the biggest, no. Biggest networking mistake ever. So do the research, do the homework, put yourself truly in the shoes of the other person, then craft a communication that if you were to receive it, you would be okay with it. You would be either happy to receive it, or you wouldn't, completely light your hair on fire. So long answer to maybe a short question, but there's my best advice.
And I want to be totally transparent, Kelly. I feel like I caught 80% of that because you turned into a robot for me, at least on the front and the back end of that. But it was very cool there for a minute. I wanted to add a beat to it and turn it into an EDM song or something. But I know that I really heard you loud and clear when you said, make sure you're not wasting people's time in the way that you reach out, and don't just give an open-ended question. Hey, how are you doing? What is it that you do? That is, loud and clear.
Be specific, be considerate, be specific, write an email that you would want to receive, and do your homework beforehand. Do so much research before you send the email.
That is great, great advice. And I want to encourage people, one of the things you mentioned for digital events, I want to encourage people to hit you up on Twitter at JK Hoey on Twitter. And can you pronounce your last name for me, Kelly? I know I've asked
Hoey.
this. Hoey. All right. Well, I know I've asked that a million times, and I always second guess it. JK Hoey. Make sure you follow her on Twitter. You can even tweet at her with the hashtag PowderKegLive. But I want to thank you, Kelly, for being a part of this show. We're going to jump to our next segment here in just a minute. But first, just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And is there anything that the Powder Keg community can do for you?
Well, keep being part of this community, keep building this community, keep contributing this community. It'll pay off in spades for you. So that's what you can do it for me. And as I always say to people, if I'm here mentoring, go and mentor somebody else.
Ooh, that's great. Pay it forward. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. We're going to transition to the last segment of our show and share some good news. It was great talking to you, and you're welcome to stick around if you want to, but no pressure for you to stick around. We do have some exciting news, though, to share with you. We've been pulling this from all of our different hubs in our community, whether that was Kansas City or Nashville or Raleigh, or right here where I'm located currently in Indianapolis. But first, I did want to give a huge shout out to some of the companies that have helped make this particular virtual event possible. Powder Keg is a place where these companies, Zotec, Black Ink, CLA, KSM Consulting, they've all come together to help make this possible. And a lot of those companies are still hiring. So if you know someone who is hiring, if you know someone that's looking for a role, maybe they've recently been displaced, maybe you yourself have been recently displaced, Powder Keg has a platform called Matches. And what we do is we learn everything we can about you and what you're looking for in terms of a company culture, in terms of what you're looking for in your career. And we help match you to a company in the Powder Keg community that is currently hiring, connect you with a decision maker, and tee up a literal email introduction of why you two should talk to each other. So if that's interesting to you, or if you have a friend that could use that, it's just powderkeg.com/jobs. Again, it's totally free. This is something we're really passionate about doing. And there have been a lot of people who've been coming in every day now from multiple companies that are having layoffs. Maybe there are people that are transitioning. I think I saw a question we didn't get to about career transitions. I highly encourage you to join that at powderkeg.com/jobs. And one company in particular I wanted to call out is Greenlight Guru. Greenlight Guru is such a cool culture. You can see their team here playing basketball. I think they were on the Pacers stadium court when they took that photo. But you can see this culture profile on powderkeg.com. You can learn about all of these awesome company cultures. Based on this profile, you can learn a little bit about Greenlight Guru. Their sort of champion mentality. They're very sports oriented. They love to win. They are hiring, and they're a great team of just between 50 and 100 employees, with a really great founder who's been a part of this community for years. So I highly encourage you to check that out. I just want to give a shout out one more time to all of our partners who made this possible today. And then I wanted to share some good news with you. This is a brand new segment. So this new segment is called Celebrations, and we want to celebrate some of the amazing people and companies. And I want to start with my friend Jeb Banner. Jeb Banner is based in Indianapolis, Indiana. He's the founder and CEO of Boardable. And Jeb shared this recently, which is a Google Docs, literally a spreadsheet of all the service workers in Indianapolis, Indiana, showing exactly where you can Venmo your favorite service workers so you can tip them and continue to tip them and support your local community in Indianapolis. This idea, I've started pollinating this into other communities like Chattanooga and like Denver, because obviously we all want to have restaurants when things go back to normal, or the new normal, as some are calling it. So I wanted to give Jeb a huge shout out. Thanks, Jeb. And then I wanted to also give a huge shout out to this company called Rightfully Sewn out of Kansas City. Singer, the big sewing machine company, gave 30 sewing machines to Rightfully Sewn, which had created these face masks. And it really helped them literally double their goal of 125K in donations. So huge shout out to Singer, and huge shout out to Rightfully Sewn out of Kansas City, Missouri. Next up, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Clario and Plotwatt, which are two Triangle startups that are helping scale a new product, these medical face shields. So amazing people doing amazing things in the Raleigh-Durham community, and wanted to give them some love. Also, our friends at Revolution Foods, Steve Case, I'm normally on a tour bus with him for Rise of the Rest, helping shine a light. And Steve and the Rise of the Rest team invest in companies in the middle of the country. Revolution Foods has huge backing from Revolution, the venture fund that Steve is also involved with. And they're working with school districts and charter school networks across the country to ensure that school children, especially students on a free or reduced lunch program, continue receiving healthy meals at home. I freaking love that. And I wanted to give a shout out to Steve and the Revolution Foods team. Next up, from Santa Fe, New Mexico, this company called Final originally launched a reusable straw product, and they were preparing to launch a reusable fork product. But as the consumer landscape kind of changed and changed very quickly, they actually shifted their product launch on Kickstarter to this amazing company called Final Wipe. So that Kickstarter is still live. We'll link to it in the show notes of this episode so you can find it and contribute to it and buy your own reusable wipes. So super cool. I love the idea of reducing waste, and I love the idea of staying relatively germ-free amidst everything going on. And last, but certainly not least, our friends in Cincinnati, Ohio, are doing something currently to address the severe shortage of protective masks. Several Cincinnati startup ecosystem players, Polar 3D, InfoTrust, and Centrifuge, have launched a pop-up mass production operation with 50 3D printers in Union Hall. PowderKeg has hosted several events, live events there in the past. And so it's so cool to hear that that space is filled with 50 3D printers in a big coalition, a big effort, again, between InfoTrust, Polar 3D, Centrifuge, Union Hall, the Health Collaborative, Northern Row Brewery and Distillery. Huge community effort. And I wanted to give a little bit of celebration, a little bit of love to our friends there in Cincinnati. So that is our first segment of the celebrations here at PowderKeg. This is something we're going to be doing in the future, in future live streams. So if you have some good news that you would like to have celebrated here on PowderKeg Live, we're going to share a link following the show, but you can also just email me directly at PowderKeg, matt@powderkeg.com. So shoot me an email there. You can also hit me up on Twitter @Hunkler, and I'm sure you already know where to find me. Last but certainly not least, be sure to head on over to powderkeg.com/events. Check out some of the other upcoming virtual events. We are covering all kinds of things from sales, how to approach sales when people maybe aren't in the same sort of buying mood that they're in. PowderKeg Pitch, which is our flagship event, but moved to a virtual setting. We're focused all on remote tool and remote work software. So this is going to be an awesome virtual event. It's going to be like Shark Tank, but live and interactive, where you can ask your own questions along with the sharks. And then finally, we've got personal branding with Chris Ducker that's coming up in May. And he has a really great message about how to operate and how to think about your career in times like this. But our very next event is on Thursday. So I want to make sure I give a huge shout out to our friends at CLA, because they brought together Glenn Dunlap, who is the co-founder and CEO of PeerView Data, to discuss some of the industry benchmarks that their data is seeing. Plus, we're going to have two national accounting leaders from CLA. Patrick Smith and Brandon Martin are two people who have helped us scale PowderKeg nationally, and they are right in the middle of everything that's going on with the Paycheck Protection Program, a lot of the CARES Act legislation that's been passed through, how to actually take advantage of that. So if you or someone you know could benefit from that, please make sure you refer them to that event. And again, that's at powderkeg.com/events. All right, that's it for today's show. I want to give a huge thank you once again to Kelly for being here today, all the way from New York City. Kelly, it looks like you're still with us. So I want to just say thank you that you are staying safe in New York. And I'm glad to hear that you are well. Thank you for all the wisdom and stories that you shared today. And we'll bring on more folks like Kelly. So I'm really grateful for that. And to be among the first to hear the stories from these entrepreneurs, investors, and other tech leaders like Kelly doing amazing things in areas outside of Silicon Valley. Subscribe to us on iTunes at powderkeg.com/iTunes. And we'll catch you next time on the PowderKeg Podcast Live. Thanks, everybody.